Okay, so we are recording. This is Easter Sunday. And we're just going to have some fun today. We're not reading anything in the book. I just made some little bullet points here, and I'm going to mention them. One, I did talk just briefly about the mindfulness, which is really more of a, because we discussed it last week. It's really a time brain issue in terms of where you're centering yourself, whether you're in the past, whether they want you to get into the present, or move you out of just dealing with the future, which probably would be stress oriented if that was the case. So, because the question had been yesterday, is that part of everything is part of consciousness. Everything we're in is part of consciousness. But this one is specific, and I found it actually in a book discussed that way, who had been a student of one of the groups for discipleship in the New Age from way back when. And he, I think, created psychosynthesis. That was Assagioli. And then the Italian, I'm not going to pronounce this guy's name right, Ferrucci or something to that effect, has written, who's contemporary, has written some nice books, The Power of Kindness, The Beauty and the Soul, so on and so forth, which come from, I mean, so there's a lineage back to the Bailey material, because Assagioli was around when Bailey was around and those groups were being done, and was one of the members of one of those groups, Discipleship in the New Age, that there were a couple books on, that some people, I mean, some groups really study those books. So anyway, but I wanted to mention that. My next question was, oh, let me make another point. You know how when you were going to church, they said, God knows everything. He knows everything you do. Remember that? Like, I mean, you know, you can never get out from underneath this. Well, when you go to Lipton with the biology of belief, where they've now discovered that you've got that recording system on every cellular membrane you've got, which keeps track of everything you do. And that's the epigenetics now that they're talking about, in terms of you've got your DNA, but then this rewrites over the DNA from this lifetime and keeps track of all of that. So if you want to know how that happens, now you're coordinating science with that statement that you just had to believe they were telling you the truth in the Piscean age, that he did know everything. Now you know how. And that's a lot of what we're going to see here, is all of this coordinates with science. It's not going to be contradistinctive to it at all, but it's just that the way that Christianity was being marketed in the Piscean age was it couldn't handle the information from science any more, frankly, than Einstein could, for that matter. But that answers one of those questions. How was it done? How did he know all that? Well, that's how. That book would help you understand that if you read it from and read what he said in terms of science. So I just wanted to throw that one out there, because I thought, oh, that's one easy to in
his audio book, he actually narrated it as well, so it's pretty good.
Which book? Oh, Lipton?
Biology of Belief. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I read it when it relatively first came out, but yeah, they've probably done all of those. I didn't even know he did an audiobook, but that's pretty logical in today's world. And he's got a big following. He's worked a lot. He and a couple of other people do seminars around the world, I think, actually. So Anybody got any comments in general they want to make while I'm going through some of this before I start this? Dead silence. Is that what I hear? Look at this polite little group today. You've all had your charts done, so you all know what I'm talking about when I talk about a chart, but the more you would get into the Bailey material and the more he talks about people starting to work up in the spiritual triad area in the upper levels, they are basically trying to figure out what the purpose and the plan is as far as the planet, for the planet, and what that is, so that they can better understand how to work with it. It's developing sentiency and awareness and all of that on subtler and subtler levels. But when I look at the astrology, you know, it, first of all, it indicates you were logged on at that point. You got to understand that in a sense you have been logged on when you were born, and you've got a purpose and a plan. It's the mini versions, you know, that each of us has. And that's one of the ways to look at it. So, you know, so it, regardless of your color, your creed, so everybody's endowed with one. Okay, so that ought to say something about the validity of everybody who's here and a certain understanding of inclusiveness, if you will, because the planet includes them all and the life force sustains them all. So they've got some reason for be here. It's not random like it might look. And so, you know, I mean, that, I think that's another way to, that you can incorporate when, yeah, everybody's got a chart, okay, but there's something more significant because your plan of action is there. All those transits, you know, they're all basically, unless this solar system gets blown to smithereens or something, those transits are going to be there and they're going to come on time. That if there's no disruption to these 7 planets in this system, you know, I've got books that 50 years, 100 years, I can look forward in that. And so if nothing happens out there to make this solar system any different in its relationships, that's going to happen. Those event patterns are going to come and they're going to happen, so on and so forth. So it's like we're practicing down here with our own little purpose and plan on a short term, because again, if you move up into that spiritual triad and are functioning on those levels, they're trying to figure out how to work with the overall purpose and the plan of the planet. So this is your training. This is your early training. That's the point I'm trying to make here, is that you're getting trained on how to do that with each lifetime you have. And so eventually you're going to join the big leagues. So, most of it all practice down here, you know, just getting us ready for it to start with. Boy, everybody's quiet. Did you guys, have you said any words since you got up yet this morning?
Good morning.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about being in your house or wherever. I know Donnie is talking, but everybody else.
I'm always talking.
That is true.
It was just really busy, so I'm just kind of like finally getting to relax for a little bit.
Good. Well, this is nice material to relax with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Penny's still sleeping, so
I haven't heard Bull yet. I don't even know if he's there.
Well, his little green logo is, even if he isn't, huh? He doesn't seem to be saying anything, so he's probably not there. He's just making it look good.
Who's it? Who's that?
That
You,
one, right
dude.
there.
Oh,
We're talking about
Oh,
you.
Yeah,
oh
we're
man, I
talking.
was on mute. I was saying all this really profound stuff.
Lisa's in the kitchen. She goes, "Who are they talking about?" I go, "Who do you think?" She goes, "Bull." And I go, "Yeah."
No, I snuck in the back.
Bull's like the Rosa Parks of the group.
Yeah, right.
Better watch that one.
Donnie made a comment to me about, well, he made it, no, on one of the tapes. Was it the last one where he talked about Rumi and realizing that when he's listening to it, the guy is really talking about what's going through his consciousness at the given moments. And that in some of the cases, at least, he's having the kinds of experiences that these books talk about. Is that basically what you were talking about, Donnie?
Well, yeah, sure.
So,
Well, he
but
says,
if-
I'm here. Yeah, at one point he even says, "I am here right now in the gift that God has given, our love," and it goes on and explains kind of where he's at in that moment.
Yeah, and considering this whole second solar system is the creation of love, which if you really want to abstract it to math, it's the union of a positive and a negative coming together. In this case, spirit and matter is the way it's described. But the point is, it's that connection constantly being made. That is love. Okay. A little contrary to the astral plane love, that we see out there. And again, we're practicing putting these things together. It turns out probably rather chaotic. We wouldn't want that as the basis of the creation of our full existence going forward, because it could be really, doesn't necessarily have a good fundamental mathematical, logical, grounded background. But we're practicing, at that point, with all of that energy swirling around. And all those emotions that none of them ever stick, but we go through them all. That's why I call that realm kind of like bubbles, because you can create whatever you want, but when pinprick it's gone, it doesn't stay. We get now to make another bubble. So, so it's where we learn to use our imagination, because you do need those principles as you go forward. But those two bottom realms are just getting to know what, getting familiar. It's like coming to kindergarten, walking in the first day with that room, all that stuff kind of thing. So that's really what level 7 and 6 are primarily, and they're not principled matter. So it's like Play-Doh. You can make this out of it, and then you can smack it out and make another structure, but they don't stay. You still got the Play-Doh, but you can be made into anything you want. You're learning kind of scenario. Anyway, what I was going to say is that when you get into cosmic consciousness, and he picks out these people who he believes have had the experience, and there's a number of people historically who have written, that's the only way he can figure out most of them, is they have to have had some kind of writing or some kind of history of somebody wrote about them to tag it with his bullet points. But their writings are doing exactly the same thing as Rumi. People just don't realize it, I think. I'm quite sure that a lot of those Leaves of Grass with Whitman and stuff were written when he is in that state and he's describing those states, because Bucke mentioned that in fact, I think he makes a comment that he feels that you should control this scenario yourself in terms of what your life pattern is here. And he felt that Whitman did not make an effort to control it. He let it control him. Okay, I think that's a point of, and that it was extremely frequent with Walt Whitman moving back in and out of it. But if that be the case, then what I'm saying is his writings are describing to you his experience and his state of mind and his consciousness at the time he's within those realms of consciousness, if you will. So it isn't just Rumi, it's probably a great majority of them. I mean, by the same token, even Christ, you know, he's talking to God. God is talking back to him, you know, and that's being conveyed. But that again is really communicating, well, he's in that state or that frame of mind that is having that experience and that awareness on another level. So, and the other interesting thing I think that Bucke makes is that the majority of the knowledge that we are being taught at this time has basically all come from people who've had those major experiences. And that is what we choose to convey forward, or we have chosen until recently, let's put it that way. We have chosen to convey that information in a general education background for, certainly in the West. I would assume some of that even happens in the East with their choices. So.
That was one thing I found fascinating when, because I think we all read Leaves of Grass at one point in, high school or college or whatever. And so I, was like, oh, yeah, just a bunch of poems, whatever. And then after I read Cosmic Consciousness, after you had, recommended that one, and then it was cool because Walt's probably towards the back of that book. And then after I finished, that one, I said, I'm gonna go back and I'm just gonna read Leaves of Grass. And then it's just like a lot of the Bailey material is like, I don't remember it saying any of this stuff, like the first time that I read it, but a lot of points or a lot of portions kind of, struck a nerve, which is pretty cool because it didn't have that meaning when I read it the first time.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, where the hell was this guy? This doesn't really make a lot of. It was
almost like something completely different, like it had the same cover, had the same name, but I'm like, hey, this is not the same material that I read before.
Yeah, because once you realize you're in that experience with him when you're reading it, then it makes a lot of sense. And even I think Carpenter, there's one in there, Carpenter somewhere from England, and some of that material. I mean, it doesn't, if you understand that, then that material makes a lot of sense. And if not, it's obviously it's made sense to somebody who's made it important, okay, or some publisher, or figured out that it was important. But for the general populace, probably goes over a majority of heads.
Absolutely.
But I think too, if you're reading it as a part of like a school curriculum, you're reading it under that that lens. It goes over maybe sometimes how it's written in the sense of like if you're talking about like Shakespeare, maybe they'll talk more about the iambic pentameter. So you're looking at it differently. So I think once you're looking at some of these things that you've read before, but you're looking at it with your own open mind and maybe your own experiences or what you've come to learn, it completely changes what it's saying to you, or maybe what it's meant to say. Because when you're reading it while you're in school, you're kind of doing it to pass a test, or however it is that they want you to learn the book and why they're teaching you the book, as opposed to taking it in as your own, and taking it in for your own self, and your, you know, what you're thinking of it and what it means to you, as opposed to what they're telling you, well, this is what we're going over, and these are the things that we're highlighting, versus maybe what the truth is behind the writing. So maybe when you've read something else, or you've lived your life in a certain way, or you've had your own experiences, everything is going to look completely different to you in that fact. So I think that's,
I think the setting and
that changes everything too.
I mean, I think we even hear that when you listen to music, you know, listening to the lyrics of the music, where a song before you were exposed to any of this had a completely different meaning. And now it's like, oh my, they're talking about that. They're singing about that.
Just like this book's. Yeah, no, that, I mean, and that's great when that happens, because then something is clicked within you to be able to recognize that, which also means you've now entered into that arena, if you will, or into that room, or however you want to describe it. That avenue is open, and the door's been opened, or however you want to look at it. So, and I think I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. The Patanjali's rain cloud of knowable things. Anybody else heard that term yet, or run into it in this material? Okay, up. As you start to move up, as your consciousness kind of is able to have a larger area to wander in, there is what they call this rain cloud of knowable things that you can reach. Now, one of the good identifiers of that is you will get somebody, for example, and a certain amount of that has scientific information in it. Obviously, because most of that science we initially run into, we're going to find on the mental plane when we experience some of the higher levels of how it's constructed. So you get two people who discover the light bulb at the same time, or you get two people who do the radio at the same time. All they've done is they've reached up at the same time to the same piece of information that's available to mankind if he's out there searching. Okay, and if he's exploring in that realm of the potential information that man can reach with his brain at any given time. That's the best example of proving that it's there, is because more often than not, you do get, when it's something major like that, we have gotten two people on the planet who don't know each other, who are not in communication, come up with the same idea. So
I've seen that firsthand. That we've heard the stories about music bands coming up with almost the exact same song at the exact same time. And then on a personal note, when I got the idea for some of the inventions and filed the patents, there were other people who filed pretty close on similar ideas. And then it's just a matter of who got there first, you know, basically. But yeah, that was all around the same exact timing and all. Pretty interesting.
yeah, well, and really, what do we describe genius as? The guy who got there first.
Cool.
I mean,
Like
no,
that.
serious. I'm not calling you a genius now.
I'm
Why
just
not?
saying, in that particular case, we did get there first, though.
Yeah, okay. But what I'm saying is that when we Now we're going to say Einstein is a genius, right? Because he got there before anybody else and had the ability to come back and convey in language or mathematical formula in this case, this information. But the point was he got there first, so he's the one we're going to give the credit to. Eventually, when you listen to Bucke, we would all get there. Eventually, could be a long eventually, but we would get there. We would figure that out. We would have that experience because he saw it. I think he was 14 when he first really got that vision of, in his imagination of the scenario. And it took him a lot longer to be able to write it down, you know, really capture it. But we all would eventually get there, but this just short circuits time and speeds things up, which I see as a plus. Okay. Because literally he moved time. He short circuited time for a lot of people. And what I'm saying by that, and not the formula itself, but the eventually, he took the eventually out of it, in as much as he could write it down, convey it, it can be distributed. And then it depends whether you can figure it out when it's laid out right in front of you. In other words, whether your mind can conceive of that yet and grasp it, but it short circuits that whole period of time that it would have taken for you to just get there. I'm talking now a number of incarnations or whatever to really get to that on your own. You know, that's part of what our education allows us to have happen. So, but that is referenced, and I think probably Blavatsky would have been the first one to use those terms, but it's definitely in the Bailey material, and it's got to be a lot of other places in Eastern religion and so on and so forth. It's just there waiting for you to reach it. Just like when you look at this chart, there's all these points up here, and it's just, they're there. It's just waiting for you to reach it, to catch the information that's in those particular realms of energy, because they're much subtler. And so that's also, you're creating the machinery that can read that material on those levels. Mankind as a whole. That's why he always talks about with the reincarnations, you're just getting a new piece of equipment, because it's been upgraded between the time that you left and your time you're coming back. So he sees that, I mean, he sees where we're going as a positive, as long as nobody tries to totally short circuit it and stop that level of evolution. So I did want to make that comment when because I think I looked at one of those tapes again and saw that and thought, yeah, well, that's you know, a lot of people, I'm sure you're saints. And I think well, the name escapes me now, the Chardin, Teilhard Chardin. I mean, you can read some of his material, and he's got a book on science, and which is lectures and various things he's done out there. I don't remember the exact title of it, but I tracked it down in the UCSD library one time. And you can read his material and his life pattern and what's going on. And you can read this material, and I mean, they're basically saying the same thing and having the same types of experiences and all of that. And of course, that's why they didn't let him publish either. They wanted him, and he had Pascal was one of his relatives and stuff. So I guess there's a family history of at least pursuing information and knowledge. But he became a Jesuit, I believe. And they wanted him to leave. And he went into paleontology. They wanted him to leave, and he refused. So basically, they pretty much shut him down throughout his life, didn't allow him to publish anything, shoved him over in China. He got stuck in China during the whole World War, sent him over there, and then he couldn't get back until after World War II. And they forbid him to publish. Eventually his material has come out. So if you want to follow in the lines of the church, you look at some of his works, because it's very close in experience and understanding of how we function with this material. So.
Who was that again, Carla?
That's Teilhard Chardin. I'm probably not pronouncing it quite right. French.
That's right. Yeah. Teilhard. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, that that's why they didn't want him to.
Do you know how to spell that?
Yeah, it's Teilhard. Day Chardin.
Chardin. Okay, I see it.
Chardin.
Got it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you might have to hunt a little for some of his stuff. And there is one where he gave lectures, and they were related to science. I'm sure I have the book somewhere, but it's a long time ago.
I see. Right. On Amazon, there's already Phenomenon of Man, The Divine Milieu. Then somebody has, just his writings, Modern Spiritual Master series, Activation of Energy.
Yeah, the one on science is a little more rare. I don't think it got that.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a collection, I believe, of lectures and stuff.
Okay.
But I may at some point be able to track it down. I found it in the UCSD library, I believe originally is where I got it. And I probably shouldn't say this. I probably copied the whole book. Because I'm not sure if you can get it in those days, that far back. A lot of used books and stuff weren't online to sell, and there weren't as many opportunities that way. But in those days, I had a copy store that would actually copy stuff and not complain. And maybe
and there's other books about him, like, or I guess he, obviously, like somebody else wrote a book, The Cosmic Vision of
Yeah.
Teilhard.
So here's a quote from him that hit me a few years ago. That Ram Dass, when Ram Dass quotes him, and it says, "Someday, after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then, for the second time in history of the world, man will have discovered fire."
yeah. Yeah, which
Yeah.
fits, I mean, the fires that are in these upper triangles that we've got here, the spiritual triangle and so on and so forth, is that fire. Yeah.
I love the poetic stuff, so that's, I'm attracted to that. So that,
I think you've sent me that before, Donnie. I remember that.
Yeah, I think Donnie likes that kind of stuff. And even you know, with Walker, with the physics of consciousness, I look at him like a Renaissance man. You know, from one cover to the front cover to the back cover, you've gone all over, but he's woven it all together and really has a wide background. And we don't have too many of those, I don't think, out there right now. But and a lot of grace. Just I think a very incredible person in his own personage and people he worked with and stuff like that. So we don't get that many of them probably out here running around at the moment.
Hey, thanks for that work. We're going to go ahead and put that right down here in our library downstairs. Referring to the Vatican Library. Hey, thank you for that work, Pierre.
Oh.
We're going to take that and go ahead and put that right down here in a nice safe spot to preserve it.
Right over in this
Put it
corner.
right next to all the Library of Alexandria stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
nobody has the key.
52 square miles of library. Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and I do believe at this point, they're at least trying to preserve a lot of the paper. In other words, they've got incredible documents there that would have been filed centuries ago, but at least they're trying to make an effort to preserve something, not that a lot of people see it at all, but that doesn't mean that the day won't come when it does open up. I mean, when I say open up, not to the public, but that they're willing to share some of this, because there's a lot of history there too, you know.
Oh yeah.
They
There's
probably have emerald tablets down there. You know?
Yeah, I mean, there's marriage licenses, so to speak, or agreements between, you know, a lot of historical figures and all kinds of stuff that's in there that we don't even have a clue they have. Just because they were the government at one point. I mean, they, you know, they were the ultimate.
Well, they still got like 70,000 Sumerian tablets that they will not let anybody translate. Sitting down there.
Yeah.
Jerks.
Well, that may change.
I hope so.
Yeah. The odds are it may change. So anybody around here, Lord of the Rings fans or anything?
I had to read it in high school.
Yeah, likewise. I read the trilogy in high school.
High school. It was.
I didn't read in high school.
I had to read for my English teacher. Actually, it was part of like curriculum, which is funny because I went to a Catholic school. So, but my husband loves the trilogy, so I'm very familiar with it.
Okay. And I think they did a reasonable job on the movies. You know, they tried pretty hard to convey and stay somewhere within the realm. But he was a member of a group of, I think there were 5 of them originally. And he was in Oxford. I don't think it was Cambridge. I think it was Oxford. Anyway, they would get together and Lewis Carroll was one of them. Okay. And I don't remember who the full collection was. Anyway, and they obviously young, we're talking early college. And so they would get together because they wanted to do something significant on this planet as writers, this group. And he was one of them. And that was his product that he came out with. We know who Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, et cetera, but things like that. But the point was, originally, this was what they were doing in their early high school or early college days, was they'd already gotten together. They already felt this was important. There was already a sense of destiny within them. in terms of what they were going to do. So I thought I'd throw that out there in case you didn't know. So,
Well, there's a lot of literature around that time, and I could see that them coming together to want to do that, because if there's just certain books that maybe were published and marketed in a different way, but if you really read into them, you see more of what we're talking about in it, you know, or you see the underlying, and that's sometimes how some books got banned. So
right.
so even things like the whole Narnia series, there's such an underlying, if you read it as an adult versus a kid, where you're as a kid maybe you're reading it more as an adventure book, but as an adult you start seeing more of the underlying things within the story. You can see it during that time they were you know, they were really talking about something different, and that's how they were putting it out there, maybe under even with Lord of the Rings, you know, you can read it as an adventure story, but if you really see some of the message that's through it, it's kind of hidden within there. So if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you just enjoy the book a little bit, you know.
Right.
So I think that's what happens, almost as if so as not to get the message out there. You know, I was talking about this last week too. You know, they put things out there that's a little bit more palatable, that gets the message out there, so it's able to be dispersed, and whoever gets it gets it. But it's out there, so it's not in a way where people can feel like it's an outright and then hide it away in the archives somewhere so nobody else gets to read it. But you know, to actually put that stuff out there where you can look at it differently and maybe see different underlying factors within the book versus just a story that's being told. So I think that's where maybe that came through.
It can be, you know, and the other thing is, I don't know if anybody else has tracked this, but I believe it's Blavatsky who originally said, and it's probably somewhere in the Bailey material, but that the first 25 years of a century is when they lay out all the basic fundamentals that are going to be developed throughout that century. A lot of it comes out very early. It's like Bertrand Russell with his mathematics, which was the foundation for the computer, as I understand it. Without that set of mathematics, it would have been difficult to go forward. And various other things. If you look at the beginning, the first 25 years of the century, it lays out the direction and the developmental phases that are basically going to be utilized during that period of time. And so I think these guys were somewhere in that realm at that age also, where they were an active conscious part of that. And I was reading Bertrand Russell's early life, and he was very unhappy. I mean, and I think he was well born in terms of the way you would put it at that point in time. So it wasn't that there was a lack of stuff. He was just unhappy. There was nothing here for him until he probably was 17 or pretty close to that age. And he discovered this mathematics at the level that really interested him. And then life, he turned around and it became wonderful for him. But prior to that, and a lot of very brilliant people, this is really an uncomfortable place when they're young. You know, they can't plug into who they are yet and what they've got to offer, because they have to go through certain developmental stages. You know, he probably was not going to, at the age of 2 and 3 years old, be able to understand those mathematics like he did at 17 and 18, because there has to be a certain amount of development we go through before we can really start to put the pedal to the metal, if you will. So anyway, because I every once in a while I use for background, I use the Lord of the Rings series. And I think one of the little biggies in there, if you will, is when Frodo says, I wish the ring had never come to me. And Gandalf comes back and says, or I wish none of this had happened. And he said, so do all who live in such times, who see such times, but it's not for them to decide. All we have to do is to decide what to do at the time that is given to us. And there are other forces at work in this world. And then he goes on. But I mean, I think that is a significant one, is all we can do is decide what to do at the time that's given to us. Now that would be good for mindfulness theme, is remembering that. But then that's putting those lines of significance in the material, in the book. And, you know, it just looks like a comment, but it certainly has a high significance of in terms of meaning, or can, if one can apply it and recognize it. So, so certainly, I mean, and it's not the only theme that is in that book, but that one certainly had importance. Oh, on a side note, I think last week I said something about terms like sovereignty and authenticity will show up and have some degree of importance. So I'm talking to my granddaughter yesterday, and she's 19 now. And we don't talk about these things. I don't go down that route with my family. They want to go there, they'll find their way. They're all kind of off in different directions, and which is fine. And so she's discussing, she says, well, you know, first of all, she's got a boyfriend. The boyfriend's been there since 7th grade, probably going to be there a lot longer. All right. So she's getting ready, pre-med school, blah, blah, blah. These are her goals. Nobody pushes her there. Okay. So she's not looking for a boyfriend either.
Is that a hint that you don't want him to be there for a lot longer, Carla?
Oh, no, that's wonderful. I mean, I
Just
don't
making
think
sure, sweetie.
Oh no, I don't think he can ever get out of her grasp. She ain't letting go. They parted for a little while between 7th and 8th grade, and then they decided they really liked each other. And she likes him because he doesn't agree with her all the time. I mean, you know, that was one of the things she looked at, is that he was really going to give her a tug of war in her thoughts and her patterns. But now going back to what you're talking about, Melissa, in terms of school, because I asked her, they both have very high grades, but she said he has higher grades than I do because he just goes and studies to pass the test. He just does what it takes to get the grade to pass the test. She says, I go in and I try to figure out what they're saying and how they got to the point they got with their information. Okay, so, but by the same token, yeah, I really don't think unless she decides to let him go, he ain't never getting out of those clutches with her. That's just the way it is. So that answers that one. But no, he's a great guy and all of that. And they seem to understand each other. But by the same token, she's out there in the world, and she's she has a work space right now, and I don't know how else she meets people, but because she's not looking for somebody, but she finds out that these guys who are like 18, 19 only have one thing on their mind, is what her remark is. And she says, once I figure that out, I'm not interested in them because I want an authentic conversation. And people, she said, people will tell me lots of times I'm weird. She says, no, I'm just authentic. I'm just going to be who I am, kind of thing. So, and I didn't blow by the word authentic to her. So somehow she came out with it herself. So some of the people evidently in that generation are concerned about it. And there's certainly been previous generations who've been concerned. They want to be themselves. They want to be who they are. That, in other words, they're going to demonstrate that personality profile that's in that chart, and they're going to express through that. And that's who they are. And the way it comes out is the way they're going to be. And if it doesn't fit the profile, tough, you know, then I'm
well,
weird.
that's very much the sign of the times right now, and you hear it a lot, is living an authentic life, being your authentic self, and a lot of people striving to be brave enough to be their authentic selves. So that is very much on point. Like when you said it last week, I was like, yep, that's definitely what you hear a lot. And it's even as parents, especially, and Donnie, I don't know if you do this with the girls. It's just that sometimes when you're raising a girl, you just want them to not lose their sense of self as they get older, because so many of us do, right, Melinda? Like around puberty, we tend to change a little bit, and maybe I felt, at those ages, you're trying to just go with the flow with everybody else. And if you're trying to be yourself and authentic, you're the weird one, like you said, like with your granddaughter. Like sometimes people are like, all right, they're a little off, but they're being themselves. So I think with the word authentic is just out there now, is much more, further out there. So you're not trying to conform anybody to being who they are. Now it's more of like, just be who you are. And you see it a lot more, and you see it a lot more with, I think, or what I see here, even with just raising your kids and trying to raise your children to be their authentic selves and not push them into molds of who you want them to be. It's let them be who they are.
My parents would have preferred if I had been more. I've always just been weird.
Okay.
I've always pushed back. I mean, I just don't care. I don't care what other, I don't care. I do what I want. I've always been like I don't know. I've never had that.
Okay, I think that's wonderful, because it's
weird. Yep. And like, this is it. This is all I got. I'm not, if you don't like it, you can just go away. Like, I don't give a shit. That's it. Like,
but that's great. So so you would be the one, right? So, and it's funny how we use the word weird when it's just you being yourself. Yeah, which is great.
Exactly the same way. He don't care. He does what he wants. He says weird shit. He wears weird shit. Like he just is who he is, and that's it. Like, we just don't care.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think if you're raised to conform, then to be at this age now, breaking free of that mold, and I know, Carla, that was kind of within my chart as well. It's kind of like getting out of somebody else's, your parents' idea of the way things are supposed to be, and just be yourself. It's just weird to go through it at this age, but then like try to keep your kid, like, all right, I don't want them to go through that, so let them be themselves, let them do what they want to do. So I hope, marking them as weird is no longer a thing, because it shouldn't be weird. Being your authentic self shouldn't be weird. Like to use the word weird,
My little girls are both Aquarians, and they call me Donnie. So I'm figuring that they're just gonna be pretty authentic. And they both dress like Punky Brewster,
Love it.
Oh,
Yeah, I had to get out of that mold too. Penny does her own thing, and it's just like, that's what you're gonna wear. I'm like, okay. Like, let it go, Melissa. So yeah, so it's break, and it's coming out of the, just changing the mindset when you're used to one way, or you're hiding your weirdness. And I think, Carla, sometimes that's exactly why things get put away, to keep people in line. If like books get put away, writings get put away, they're considered weird or alternative, because it's not what they want the norm to be, when probably it is the norm of how people thought, but now you're told, no, you're wrong. So let's break away from that. So like, I think now within this new age, we are allowing authenticity to really be expressed versus trying to. So you see a lot more people questioning. This generation definitely is a lot more questioning of how things are and why do I have to do it this way, and or and their thought process is different, and it's nice because it was kind of, I think, held back for the I grew up in a very this is how things are done, and not that it was super strict, but Catholic school, go to church, do things this way, this is what you're supposed to believe. And even to go into, like, my degrees in forensic psychology, so even to go into psychology, it gives you it opens your mind to different ways of thought, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, oh, there's one of them. Hi, sweetie.
It's Aubrey.
Hi, Aubrey.
Well, I thought it was just interesting that she came up with the word, because I didn't feed that word to her, and nor did and the word weird was the contra word to it that's used out there these days, but that's just the way it is. But anyway, it's at least they're wanting to break out and be able to express who they are and recognize that as being important. But of course, with her, by the same token, it was the minute I find out that that's all they're interested in is I'm not interested in talking to them anymore, because I can't have a conversation with them. And I kind of explained, look, this is Mother Nature making sure that there's a reproduction here. You got to understand, these guys at this age, that Mother Nature has taken over there. And that's basically all they're really, really driving for. So don't expect any more out of them at this point, period. Then you don't have to be disappointed. Just realize that because it was 150 years ago, at 15, that quinceañero that we still have here in Mexico, that party, that was a coming out party. That girl was ready to get married at 15 because she probably wasn't going to live past 30. Basically because of illness, so on and so forth, was going to take her out. And there was no real good medicines that far back. So the Mother Nature, in order to get the reproductive cycle in there, that's when it was starting. And they were ending, like I said, by, that child had to at least get some parenting up to it till 15, so the cycle could go back, continue. We're not that far out of that. That's one of the things that I think is been the topic of conversation in education, at least, is that our psyche has moved, and developmental phases that way have moved a lot faster than organically we can move. So yeah. So anyway, but in her case, she's quite disappointed that there isn't this realm of people out there she can actually have an intelligent conversation with, because they're not capable at this age. I told her, just don't expect it. Kind of thing. So anyway, so much for that. But that word, I'm glad it's surfacing more than even I realized it was. I know it's a key word. Now, if I go back, let me see, what are some of my notes that I have here. I want to go back to a couple things on the chart, and then I'm going to pull a couple things out of some of the Bailey material. Anybody got any conversations they want to have before we go further with this? Silence is golden. Okay.
It's the language of God.
Yeah, the golden thread. There's also a term, it's got to be an old one. You know, we talked about how the golden thread, it's all one thread that just keeps growing until you've got a human being. We discussed it a week or two ago.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm trying to remember the exact theme. There is a sentence, and maybe will see it in some of this material, where they talk about the thread has been either snipped or cut or something. And that's indicative of like when you're gonna die. The thread's been cut. That just came up top of my head. I've heard it many times, but you may see it sometime. And that's really what it represents at that point in time. So one of my questions on this chart on 117, because we've had the discussion of what good and evil now to some extent.
I believe so.
Yeah. Questioning what it is, so on and so forth. So on this chart, where does good reside? I mean, everything really has to be in this chart. Everything in consciousness really has to be here. Okay. But if you look on this chart, where you're going to expect to find good.
Above where you're at. Above where we're at. I don't know.
Well, technically, that's probably the most correct answer, because if you're going to be looking for good, yes, everything above where you are, but that doesn't mean that you haven't incorporated some of it on the way up. But the point is, now this system uses the word monad, but in Christianity, you would use the word God, right? So if you're looking for good, down on our lower levels, we put another O in the word, but there's got to be some reflection of those two words having some similar meaning. All right. So if you're basically at the very bottom coming up, it's still everything above wherever you are. Okay. It doesn't negate that what you are doing on that level when it's appropriate is not good relative to somebody who's a little higher up. That it's the learning curve. In other words, like I said, I think it's just a matter of time and development, and it's just not going backwards into old patterns. And when there's a real retrogression of the society or something like that, then we really have to take a look, because we're going back to things that are not necessarily appropriate as an activity level now. So, but I want to share something that's in Esoteric Healing, which is a book I don't get into all that often. I'm not looking to be a healer or something like that. But the information in here is good. And, you know, he goes through laws, which are basic, and rules, which I think he defines that, doesn't he, in the beginning of, or maybe we haven't got that far yet. In one of his books, he does anyway. Laws are things that are really basic. They're fundamental to the design of the system. And they're there and they're not changing. So if you can butt your head against it for as long as you want, or you can work with it and understand it. And what science is trying to do is to find all the laws that are accurate and appropriate and consistent. Okay. But this one is it was law number 2, and it was in the laws and the rules enumerated. And this one says disease is the product of and subject to 3 influences. First, a man's past, wherein he pays the price of ancient air. I would expect we all have ancient air that's our own. I think he's talking about an individual's ancient air. Second, his inheritance, wherein he shares with all mankind those tainted streams of energy which are group origin. Third, he shares with all nature forms that which the Lord of life imposes upon his body. That his is the big H, capital H. So it's not talking about an individual. It's the Lord of life imposes on his own body, of which we are part. Okay. These three influences are called the ancient law of evil sharing. So basically what you've got is you've got your own karma history. You have got the tainted streams of energy, which are group origin. And now oftentimes he will talk about the illnesses and stuff that just keep going on. You know, a few of them we've got vaccines for now, effectively vaccines, okay, for polio and smallpox and things like that. And then that which the planet comprises, the planet of which we are going to work within and adjust to and become, well, like moving up this chart. Okay, it's very hard to put some of these lower levels, which are unprincipled matter, try to push them up into that spiritual triad, for example. And this planet is still growing and evolving, so it's part of that. So that's why when he's talking about it as the ancient law of evil sharing, this must give place someday to the new law of ancient dominating good, which lies behind all that God has made. This law must be brought into activity by the spiritual will of man. So, I mean, I've always loved that transition to shifting to the new law of the ancient dominating good. So it's a matter of, and he talks about, let me find the section that I want. In terms of the basic indication of the time period, the law of dominating good will be brought into activity by the spiritual will of man. What does this mean? It means that only when truly large numbers of people are controlled by the spiritual triad, so you know where that is in this chart, have built the Anakarana, which they really had to do while they were still on that mental plane, and can therefore use the spiritual will, can disease be stamped out, and only good can control. It will, of course, be a gradual process, and in the early stages, almost imperceptible. And it says, again, why is this? Because evil, crime, and disease are the result of the great heresy of separatedness. And because hate and love, and not love, controls. He makes a very strong statement here. Forget not that he who loveth not his brother is a murderer, ever the symbol of hate. In other words, I think what he's really saying there is that when you do not love, of course, you do not embrace the idea of the other party. You're totally rejecting that other party. You're trying to negate that other party. And now I'm talking from an energy level, is you're just, so in that regard, especially when we look back at what we talked about with consciousness last week, about that you're seeing that other party and you are giving that other party, by recognizing it in your consciousness, giving them existence in that regard by your level of interaction with them. And then when you withdraw it, and I'm not talking about on a negative way, then their existence is not the predominant thing in your picture here anymore, because you're on to whatever else is in the next moment of consciousness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I would expect the reason this sentence is the way it is here is that it's ever the symbol of hate, because that hate, you really want to reject whatever that is. You're pushing that away. You are not going to allow that to be included in your world. But that energy is still part of the planet. It's still part of the whole. And so it says, as yet the sense of universality and of identity with all is not to be found, except in advanced initials and initiates. Mass consciousness and the demonstration of the herd instinct must not be confounded with the sense of oneness, which marks the rightly oriented person. In the New Age teaching Ananta Anakarana and the Constitution of Man, principally from the angle of the three periodical bodies and not so much from that of the lower threefold man, will be emphasized, particularly in the higher schools of learning, thereby laying a sound foundation for the esoteric schools, which will be slowly emerging. The new perspective upon humanity will thereby be attained. The nature of the spiritual will be taught, in contradistinction to that of the selfish personal will. By its means, tremendous new potencies will be released and safely released into daily life. So yes, if and when it's taught that first of all, this spiritual triad exists, this energy is up there, this will be part of you, but this part does not require form to be seen. This is consciousness that exists and can exist without the body, if you will, the formless parts of you, even though you may choose to be attached to a body, which allows you to function in these lower three worlds for whatever purpose you've got going on at the time. That whole realm, if that is taught, then yes, a lot of new potencies would be released into the overall consciousness of man, because you're going to convey that information that even if they're not all that connected yet as a younger person, they will be as they grow and identify. But this is also where the good that's existing for us to continue to build into our consciousness, which then means it gets shared in consciousness with other beings. That's when all those tendencies will be released into our active total being. Comments?
I was just thinking that's probably really well laid out in education in the New Age. Might be interesting to take a look at, skim through that.
Okay. So if we take a if we just use that thought right now, let me see if there's anything further. I think that's pretty much the gist of this that I wanted to convey by the book. So you know where good is found, in as much as you just need to really, it's found within you for everyone. It's just that simple. And if you can reach in and bring even a little bit of that down and convey it or demonstrate it, whether it is just a nice smile to somebody or it's a little kindness that's projected, then you start to bring that energy into the everyday world around you. And when you share it, you might think it gets expended on whoever you give it to. But this kind of energy, which is energy now, it's not a force, it's an energy. it will have momentum, because it'll be a plus for whoever receives it. Because if you give somebody a smile, even if it's somebody you don't know, I'm not talking about a pickup smile because it's a, you know, you're looking to score somewhere. Not that we're of that age in the same way that my granddaughter would be. But let's say that you just see somebody across the room that you don't know, or you're standing on a bus and somebody else is standing on a bus and you smile at them. That is an implied inclusiveness right then and there. You have recognized them and you have included them in your consciousness, and that is an opening, that is a good feeling, but it doesn't necessarily go away now. So the bus stops or the train stops, out you go your separate ways, you never see each other again. That you have conveyed to that other party does not stop there. In other words, that now has a plus factor within that person's consciousness that is going to find a way to go out and express itself in a connection with somebody else, or a nice movement. And so all I'm saying is, when you bring something down as simple as that, because you're literally pulling it from you and you have the access to all of this, then you've unleashed some good onto this world that's going to keep going. Okay. It's not a dead end because you just smiled at somebody and that's it.
I'd say also that it doesn't stop with the self either, because I'll just use the example from the last few days. I take a walk every morning. I haven't done mine yet today because I've been so busy, but when I'm walking, you know, just random people will walk by and I'll just give them a smile, or, you know, good day to you and something like that. And in my mind, I'm thinking, doing this consciously because it's helping them. And then, like you said, they'll go and project that out. But for me, it has a snowball effect with me too, because once I project that, I don't want to stop. I want to do it every time I see someone pass my path. And it just feels better and better and better as I keep going. It has like a snowball effect. And so if it's doing that for me, what is it doing for these other people that I've kind of projected that to? And now they're having that feeling and spreading that same goodwill. It's just like, it's pretty amazing to think about that, and how it can just so quickly expand just beyond you, just for one hello to someone that you've never met before.
Right. And it really is the foundation of health, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I do that, like, those are my best days. I feel good. I could be sick as a dog the day before, but if I do that and it's just like amazing, I'll feel better. And I just want to keep pushing through the day and just feel good. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, because it gets everything flowing, for starters. And remember, now we're talking energy now and not forces. And so if I can grossly define the difference at this point, that energy is, it has no stops. The forces, you got to eat the carrot and the lettuce and the cereals and the grains to convert it to forces to get you moving to, in other words, you know, well, it's a Tesla and a regular 39 Ford engine. Okay. Is the difference. So that good that you're bringing down doesn't have to be converted. It's dynamic, for starters. So it also gets within your whole system, your energy moving through those chakras and doing what it's supposed to be doing. So yes, in fact, probably for some who have been either very grossly mistreated or whatever, you would think that they might be the ones who would be great to be recipients, but they would also be ones who probably need to give some of that even more than anyone else, in terms of the benefit it's going to bring back to them. Not that they would think about it or other people would expect them to do that or push them to do it, but that's the real essence of that, is that, yeah, it's the overall health of humanity is, and we're really short on that right now. We've I think since the 90s, since the beginning of the 90s, we've really experienced a polarization that has just grown more and more into two sides doing a battle and not interacting. That's a part of what we've got now that's substantial, probably on the whole planet for that matter at this point. Certainly in this country, we've had a strong polarization, but it's probably gone further. And basically what that's saying is we are not including, we're cutting this whole sector out of people. So it creates a separativeness between the two that he talks about here, that when you have that, it's not healthy for anybody. Let's put it that way. This energy is not flowing. This energy is not interacting in the way that consciousness is meant, of which we're creating, is meant to function.
Kind of
So-
divide and conquer we're living in right now, a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure but we're not effectively conquering either with it.
Right.
In other words, if you divide and conquer, it's because you want to win over the whole thing, and it doesn't appear that anybody's winning over anything either. So it's really a division and a separation of that's dysfunctional to the planet itself, because that's really what we need to ultimately be aware of, caring about, is the well-being of this planet, because we're a component part of it. So if we are not, if we're cutting sections out, and everybody's cutting sections out almost at this stage right now in the political environment globally, and all of this, we're so busy making incisions and dissections all over the place. Not healthy.
The irony of that is a lot of those people who kind of don't want to go out there and project it like that, in their minds, they might be thinking, oh, I want to do something to make things better, but we're just sometimes creating more problems that are just kind of compounding the issues at hand. And so we're not really making any real progress, or at least that's been my observation as I see what's going on. And, people out there just trying to put their twist on how do I make things better, but it's a lot of one-sidedness out there. And
Well, yeah.
Frank, yeah, speak up.
No, bro, no, you're hitting right on the head, but it goes back to what Carla was saying earlier. Like, you got to fix within first. Like, how do I help out? Well, man, I can't help out anybody. And it goes back to the old adage in the airplane, right?
Yeah, create our own chakra blockers that we got to get out of the way so that we can improve ourselves, and then project that out and hope that spreads.
But a little smile or just a little kindness, anybody can really do if they want to. That you can bring out of yourself because you have access to it.
Mm-hmm.
We got to be aware in the moment in order to be able to do that.
Right.
Yeah, but the point is, it is doable. It's because it's within you to do that. That's where you're going to find it.
Right. But it's such a simple solution, and so many
Well,
people
and
don't want to.
DK says somewhere that, it's the separateness that's probably our biggest sin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he says that, he might say that. I don't know if he uses the word sin or not, but something along that's our problem, is the belief in that we're separate.
Well, he just used it. He said it was murder. Okay.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I can.
It's pretty definitive.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And if you saw it in consciousness, if you could see it in the abstract, in the forms of light and so on and so forth. Actually, let me see if I can find Besant's. I probably don't have it. Let me see if, the way she described, she described it really well. I mean, the
Illusion of separateness.
oh, okay, yeah, here, let's go through this again. We went last week. So she's talking about consciousness, and she's saying, in the analysis of all that exists, we come to the general realization all is separable into either the I and the not I. In other words, I'm here, I'm the divine spark, the old chip off the old block, that's the I, and everything else out there is the not I. And this is how our consciousness works. It's how it plays on our field. This is science, if you will. There is nothing which cannot be placed under one of them, either the I or the not I. Self is life, consciousness, and not self is matter and form. Here then we have a duality, but the twain are not two separate things, isolated and unrelated. There is a continual relation between them, a continual approach and withdrawals, an identification and a repudiation. And remember the word repudiation, okay? Because that's really what it just was saying over here. This his word obvious, or her words obviously better than what I was saying. But when he said in the early stages, what the disease stuff can't be stamped out, but the good will, in its gradual process, will bring the health back, so on and so forth, on the overall, and that eventually good will control. It'll gradual process in the early stages, almost imperceptible. Again, why is this? Because evil, crime, and disease are the results of the great heresy of separativeness, and becomes hate and not love controls. So where with you got yourself and you're not self, and you identify, and a continual approach, and then a withdrawal, a repudiation, this interplay shows itself ever changing in the universe. So when he gets in here and he talks about in the early stages, it's hard to see, and why is because evil, crime, and disease are the result of the heresy of separativeness, and because hate, not love, controls. Then goes on to say, forget not that he who loveth not his brother is a murderer, ever the symbol of hate. But so putting that together with what she's talking about here, she says, you know, we've got the ever-changing universe. We have a trinity, not a duality. We have the self, the not self, and then the relation between them. All is summed up, all things, all relations, actual and possible, and hence three, neither more nor less, is the foundation of all universes in their totality, and of each universe in particular. The fundamental fact imposes on a logos, which is probably not our problem. At this stage, we're not being logos. The triplicity of manifestation in the solar system, and hence the one, the point, going forth in three directions to the circumference of the circle of matter and returning back to itself, manifests a different aspect at each place of contact with the circle. The three fundamental expressions of consciousness are, or will, wisdom, and activity, the divine triad or trinity. But here's where we get back into this repudiation, if you will, or the way I see it connected. For the universal self, the inner self thinking of the not self, okay, thinking of the not self identifies himself with it, which is not what's happening when there's hate. It thereby shares with it his being. This is really key to understand if you want to understand how the real fundamentals of building consciousness and interacting in consciousness is, because in order for you to recognize everything else out there, you have to share with it your own being. You have to give to it to give it recognition. And this is the divine activity, the existence lent to the non-existent, the universal mind. In other words, so when he talks about down here, he's saying basically the same thing, because hate and not love controls, and somebody who does not, he who loveth not his brother is a murderer, ever the symbol of hate. It's because you are repudiating that which you hate. You are not willing to recognize it. You are not, that is separativeness. You are creating a situation of separativeness that is not meant to function in consciousness. Okay, and I understand you can't see 6 billion people in one view and give them all. You can when you get larger, because you do it. You have passion as a separative person. You have compassion when you can identify with the whole, for example. And yeah, we got eyeballs and we're looking at what's basically in front of us, but that's an individual. You can narrow it down, your recognition. But the point is, until you give recognition to something in your consciousness, it doesn't exist. Yeah, which is great on one level for us at this level, because like when we talk about, we only see a very narrow range of light. We only hear a very narrow spectrum of sound. Thank God. Okay. And it's one of the reasons that when I was in my early 20s, I just gave a class. I gave an order to myself, only send me information that relates to me and my family, that's important for me to have. I don't want the rest of it. I've seen people who are incredibly psychic. They are stretched out across the world, literally, and all of their time and space is eaten up by it. And their consciousness channels or their audio channels or whatever are just constantly being barraged by higher amounts of input than we normally can do well and function well. So if you want to get something done in this world, you can't have every receiver you got on high. Oh, okay. Reminded me of a oh, I better drop that one right now. But anyway, you got the point I'm making is we are just lucky we have narrow ranges at this point when we're down here in these lower realms dealing with matter. Okay, because we don't have the capacity to function with all of those dials turned up, you know, and those ranges. Now some people, like I said, we talked about before, some people will now start to see auras of people, or some people will see Well, we've got 7 colors now, but there's probably some other stuff, or some people are very sensitive to being able to see. The painters, I would assume, need to really be far more sensitive, and it may be part of what they're developing when they're painters in this lifetime, the graduations of color between and the subtleties between them, or the taste. Let's take a wine taster. Has to really have the sensitive discrimination of a lot of different flavors and ranges that most of us don't have. They may well be developing that sense during that period of time, but there's some element of control to some extent. They're doing it specifically, getting within this range. Did anybody ever read Perfume? It's a piece of fiction. It's a German writer. He wrote 1 or 2 other books, and then that's what he wrote. But if you read that book and you looked at it from the viewpoint of, because I would think he could not have written that book without having the olfactory sense fairly well developed in himself to even come up with this book. Yeah, if you want, it's a short piece of fiction. It's not that long. And better read than seen the movie. Dustin Hoffman was in the movie, but it can affect the impact, the way the words that he used to write this book are, in terms of having a sense that highly developed and out of range with the norm. You know, his sense of smell was way advanced beyond anything that most people have, I think. And it makes me wonder about the author, because he had to. You can't even come up with this if you can't entertain that experience in yourself. So anyway, so what tangent led me down that road? I'm not sure.
It was, our focus and not getting too broad, and
Oh yeah, that we're very lucky that we're not, because he talks, and I think we read this last time, that the upper levels in this chart, when you're up in the 2s and 1s and maybe on the levels even above this set of charts, is where the cosmic entities have the capacity to calculate all of that on all these different grades of this, that, and everything else. And so they can calculate and synthesize all of that and actually function well. So, but for us, we're just lucky. In fact, I think, what is the thing in the ears that rings? Okay, tinnitus or whatever. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't sound to me from articles I've seen that that's fun to entertain either. That's another audible range that actually, I think a lot of diet and stuff can help that. In reality, I think it's part of the responses to whatever you're putting into your body at the time is got an unusual response now that you're getting from it, rather than whatever might have been the normal one at some point. Anyway, comments on that? Interaction and rejection of, repudiation of, versus rather than embracing all that's in consciousness, finding somewhere in your world for it, at least if nothing else, that it exists. You love it or like it. Um,
Carla, I have to jump off actually.
Sure.
We
Okay.
have our Easter. We have to get going to our Easter lunch at my dad's house.
All right.
But
Well, nice you could join us for this.
yes, I will see you guys next week.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Bye, Missy. Take care.
Bye. Bye. Thank you. You too.
Bye.
You know,
and-
Lisa was just saying, because she's here listening too, she goes, it was a lot easier when she was younger to communicate and feel all these feelings. As she got older, she realized it's part of the system that was created by these other entities to not let us be able to communicate within and not be able to see the beauty of what has always been there. You know, we get distracted because of whatever input, whatever you want, but everyone has their own thing that they get distracted by that draws them away from what we're talking about.
yeah, and part of what they talk about, and now I'm going to astrology for a minute, that the original Neptune you've got is it's interesting. It's put in as a smaller ego that you can handle in the earlier years, but most of the planning and the imagination and stuff you use to figure out where you're going to go and what you're going to accomplish. And that cycle lasts until you're in about your mid 40s, usually for most people, or early 40s, somewhere. It bounces a year or two, depending upon how fast that orbit is moving. And then you shift over and you now take the long view. And that's when the more of the spirituality itself has room, and you find room for it, and that's time for that to develop. But initially you got to get yourself positioned in this world somehow, and that's your first 40 years. And then you're going to get a perspective of, well, I'm almost halfway here, and I'm not where I thought I was going to be oftentimes, or where do I go from here? Because I've been on the uphill climb, and now I already get a sense that the other side of this hill has different things that I should be dealing with, or open to, or be able to be receptive to.
Right.
If
Exactly.
if that adds in. So it makes it a little easier for this material after 40.
Hmm.
I think I'll add on to that I think there was a distinct point in my life, just from my experience, where it opened up to accept the brotherhood of all humanity. And that was a really distinct kind of moment where it opened up, where I accepted kind of everybody at one time. And it was really emotionally powerful experience to realize, like, oh my gosh, of course it was and that was probably just after 40 or so.
Yeah, I mean, it's a stress reliever, actually.
Yeah, it's huge. But then it was scary because not many are open to that. There's still a lot of negativity or hatred or whatever. So.
Well, you were looking for somebody else to have the same feelings. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And they're just scared, or they're confused. They don't know yet. And eventually, I think when people on their deathbed, if they don't know by the time they're on their deathbed, that moment right before they hit that light is when they realize everything we're talking about right now. It just hits them all at once.
Mm-hmm.
That's my belief.
Yeah. I want to go. Anybody else want to comment about that before I shift topics? Okay. So we got, I think in the East, it's called Shiva, right? The creator and the destroyer. Is that correct? It's the way it's analyzed. And for the most part, I think historically, humanity's not really been able to understand how you can have both in the same one. How would you put it? I mean, a lot of people can't reconcile that.
Except, but you can't really have one without the other.
Right.
So,
But I don't.
It's like calling God by different names, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's how I look at it. It's like, you know, some people call it Muhammad, some people just call him God, Yahshua, whatever, you know. I think it's the same thing.
Okay, but I'm just saying, I'm working with this particular entity or being or energy, really energy we're talking about. Okay, but if you want to take this now to science, you want to take it to consciousness, you want to take it to polarities of plus and minus, imagine a light bulb that's connected to an electrical socket, if you will. If you turn the switch on, you got light, right? You turn the switch off, the light goes out. So for somebody who doesn't understand electricity, that's both sides of that, the creator and the destroyer. Boom, there it is. In other words, you flip this button, whatever it is, and you get this light and you flip it off and it's gone. And it's all only been just a shift of the polarity of the flow of the energy, right? So that takes that whole scenario and makes it completely understandable if you understand electricity and wiring and so on and so forth. But the point is, that's basically it right there. What was a mystery for ages in Eastern religions of how can this entity, because they would see it as an entity, be both. It's as simple as flipping a switch. So when he talks about incarnation and then leaving and then reincarnating, they're talking about the same thing. They're talking about that type of energy that sustains that on and off and can flip the switch on and off. So, and until you see that energy, until you can literally see it, it's probably hard to imagine that. But those are the kinds of things when you have these experiences, they will symbolically demonstrate to you some of the principles, which you may or may not interpret accurately when you first see them. But again, that helps then when you read material like this, where you've had a history of people who have had these types of experiences and they have some way to convey some of the meaning of it that newbies or people who are not used to all of this, they get a little help. At least it helps them realize they're not really crazy after all. So oh, I'm going to go back to rag on one of my general themes which is not forcing group work until it's ready. And I believe I'm looking in white magic at that point in time. I think I'm looking at page 38, which we just read not very long ago. Because we had gone through human consciousness, self-consciousness. That's self-consciousness is the individual. So the next section was group consciousness, and the he talks about which is a consciousness of the great sum totals is arrived at by man through the development, first of all, of his individual consciousness, the sum total of the lives of his animal, emotional, and mental natures, plus the spark of divinity dwelling within the form which they make. So that's him, that's his soul, and that's his history, if you will, of all of his lives is summed up in that sentence. Then comes awareness of his group as specified for him in that group of disciples working under some master who represents to him the hierarchy. That implies that the group is already formed and he becomes aware of his group. And to me, that's important to understand, because then he's going to fit in. He is part of it. His energy pattern works with the group, or he acclimates to the group. But he's already, for him to even be able to recognize it, he has to then be in sync with it. Versus picking out 5 people in random and making you all do the same thing together. Okay. Forced, in other words. Like you guys are trying to do at work. Okay, and what communism tries to do to the entire political body of, in this case, a given country, because I think the one who truly practices communism, Russia doesn't at this point in time, is China, where you belong to the state. And your product belongs to the state, whatever you produce. Okay. And you don't have your activity. It's like the actresses. I think there was an actress who did that Crazy Asian or something movie that was out a year ago or something to that effect. But she's Chinese and she went back to China and she disappeared for, they do disappear for a few months generally, and then they show up again. And she had gotten double contracts. She had one contract that showed she earned a certain amount of money. And then she had another contract behind that, which wasn't public or presented to the government to pay taxes. Okay, so there was a degree of cheating going on there. But when she did resurface again, the leader of China, Xi Jinping or whoever he is, said, you can be an actor and that is work, but you cannot be a personality that people follow. Okay. So in other words, you can't have your own following. You cannot be recognized or for anything other than your work. So what I'm saying is that at this early stage of the game, we're here to do something. That chart has a purpose and a plan, and it needs the space to work the plan out. But that plan does not necessarily mean that it's in total sync, for example, with the Chinese Communist Party's interpretation of how all of us on this landmass are going to live focused as one group kind of thing. Because we're not here for that down here. What is it? It's experiment, experience, and express are the 3 E's that DK talks about. At this stage, that's what we're doing. We're learning the realm we're in, and so what some of the rules are, and how to fit into that realm, and yet have some flexibility of who we are. So to have a ruling come down on top of everybody, to do that, it's too early. And the point that I'm making is, from what he said here, is the point at which you become group conscious is after you've gone through that self-conscious, after you've gone through that soul development, so on and so forth. And then there's a group already formed that you're going to fit with. And each time you move up one of these little sub-levels, those veils fall away that were put on the way down. You're now taking them off. And so with each veil coming off, everything in your realm is more transparent. There's less blocking you. Okay, there's less obstruction. We got lots of obstruction down here. We each have an individual physical body that doesn't really flow one to the other. We need to, there sometimes there's an instantaneous connection, but I can see those on a chart kind of thing. That's energy that connects. We can't have everybody rejecting everybody else, but basically physically you're still your physical form. The two might become one, but they don't, you've still got your own definition, even though ideologically two are supposed to become one, conceptually. So here you evolve into the realms where there is group consciousness. It's not rejected, because you're now up functioning in the realm with that energy that's all working at this certain level. And there's a transparency, so you're all now tuning in to the same wavelengths on that spiritual triad, because the dynamics there are different, because those are formless. So anyway, like I said, I'm always ragging on not enforcing people who are functioning in the physical and the astral plane in particular, and obviously early mental, until you've got an integrated personality. The soul isn't even interested in you, because you're just dorking around. You're gathering, I think, I don't know. I mean, the soul isn't really interested in you until you come knocking at the door for the soul. You got to work your way up there, and you've got to qualify, certain qualifications, that integrated personality, so on and so forth. But you need the room to get there. We get this, that's what they're trying to do, I think, on the planet right now, is make everybody function as one or something like that. All of these countries, all of these nationalities, people, interestingly enough, are part and very well connected to their own landmass. And those land masses have history. And, that'll be a challenge for the planet, but that integration will be very slow. Every time you try to have one, you have a war, right? Yeah. There's always, historically, there's always somebody out there going to conquer the world. It's generally the countries that have either a soul or a personality ray that's first ray. Those are the first ones. They're the most likely suspects. What do they call them? the usual suspects, you know. England has the first ray aspect, Germany has the first ray aspect, and China has one. Figure out who thinks they're qualified to rule the world. Those will be your first three guesses. If you understand race structure. Yeah. There's other structures that'll do it different ways, you know, maybe they're just going to manipulate or coerce emotionally or whatever, country-wise, you know. But the ones who really think they can control everything would be that first ray type of energy. And those are the three countries that have the predominant forces there in their major either personality or soul rays. And those are the ones that you see have made an endeavor. England has done it differently. They colonized, and maybe effectively did for some of the people they colonized, but Germany, it was by force. And if China makes an effort to do that globally, you know it will have to be by a form of force, because you couldn't possibly bring a cohesive unity of every country in the world under the direction of that country at this point in time. You know, doesn't mean somewhere down the line that may not happen in the ultimate synthesis of everything, but I don't think it's happening anytime soon on this planet. Yeah. So, because we're down here with forces, we're not down here with energy. We function in these lower realms with forces, and they, you know, what do we do down here? We pit one force against another. Actually, even call it forces. Air Force, you know, special forces. They're all, I mean, they're recognized as forces.
Forces.
Yeah. So anyway, there, the point I want to make there is the one I just happened to see it in print, is that the further you move up here, the more group conscious you are, just by the essence of the energy that you are at that point. When you've made that contact, then you're building a body, the body you got, which has a lot of different levels and dimensions. You're building that in, and that energy is there. And that energy, when you move up in those realms, is groups. It's not obstructed like the general stuff that we deal with day to day in today's world. Oh, so even the theme in Lord of the Rings is that man can't be the one who you put your trust and faith in, because he is weak and susceptible to power. Okay, so looking at the chart, why would man be, how would you substantiate why he looks weak? In other words, what is there one sees in where we are in that chart relative to, and why we would even come to a conclusion that man would be weak and susceptible to. Anybody got any ideas?
The astral.
Silence is golden. Well, this is actually, I think, on page 38 also. The human consciousness or self-consciousness, towards which the development of the life, the form, and the awareness in the three other kingdoms is gradually tended. So those 300 kingdoms are the ones down below. Animal, vegetable, or mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms. Okay. When they talk about this term concerns the individual consciousness of man, and in the early stages is more animal than divine, owing to the dominance of the animal body with its instincts and tendencies. HPB defines man accurately as an animal plus a god. And therein, I think, lies the issue. And the answer to that issue is, it says later, it is more strictly human, neither purely animal nor entirely divine, but fluctuating between the two stages, thus making the human kingdom the great battleground between the pairs of opposites, between the urge or the pull of spirit and the lure of matter or mother nature, between the so-called lower self and the spiritual man. And that's it in a nutshell. Is we're in that transition. That's what we're doing. But you don't get to consider the spiritual man until you make a connection with the spiritual triad. So the battle down here in terms of the weakness is, it's just the battle to pull up. And yet there's the innate history of where you're coming from pulling you back until you make it through. That was on page 38 of White Magic, by the way. And Blavatsky always had a great way of making comments like this succinct. When she talked about the atom, she talked about that it just went and made holes in space, which is basically what it did. I don't think they had the term atom maybe at the time she was talking about it, but she just said that that's the way it is. And in this case, she says, basically, it is an animal plus a god. So you're doing the battle of moving from the history of animal development, which was essential on this planet to get us to a point where we would have the form to then keep moving on to move up to that spiritual development. So when they talk about weak, and then they talk about power, and because when you put when you take first rate energy, which is ultimately the ultimate energy of all of it, it's not running a full play, but let's face it, it's what you unleash out of the center of an atom when you break it open before it's ready to open up by itself. And you know what we got? We got something we're really not ready for here. But that is energy that we're seeing when it blows up. Okay, that's not a force. The lowest that they talk about that conveyance of that monadic type energy comes down to the astral plane, and it's experienced as desire. Okay. That's as close as it gets connected to an emotion. And ultimately, it's meant to be the desire to drive you upward. And ultimately, it will be in the evolutionary plan. But in the meantime, it's got a desire for a whole lot of other things along the way as it's running through the gamut of what's holding it back, and conquers each one as it moves on its way up. So when they talk about man considered weak and he is always loving power, well, in the earlier stages, that is his lifeline to pull him up. Okay. But there's a lot, I'm sure there's a lot of faltering along the way in the history of mankind. You know, when that ring is there, so to speak, within the presence of whomever, then that is a real draw and a pull to pull, in this case, one backwards and to falter and to somehow think that you can use it for something it's not. You know, like the steward of Gondor, you know, got sucked in, the old man who had Boromir and Faramir. So, I mean, you know, okay, so you think you can use it. I mean, it's fools rush in where angels fear to tread, because they have no idea what they're dealing with. But that's the weakness. That is the concept of why man is considered weak. It's because we're just in this process of this battle now. We haven't conquered it. We're doing it. You know, we're moving up. And so that's the battleground. And some people are going to make that choice to do that, and others are just not going to have the strength yet, because they haven't hooked up with enough of that energy from above that's pulling them, that they've connected to, which will help pull them up. Comments?
You just explained what we're looking at. I think there's so much there. It's so hard to even comment on that
Bull.
for me.
Bull isn't there, huh? Okay. Must not be, or he fell asleep.
I'm here.
Oh, I want your comment. I'm not hearing you.
I think it makes sense as far as we're kind of just caught in the churn, caught in the middle, you know, 1 foot over each side of the line, trying to go up, but still having that sense, or, you know, or that pull back down for whatever it is. Like, don't want to leave your, you know, the comfort of what you know.
Yeah, and then, and even our instincts and all of that are still programmed that way. I mean, and that's another one when you read the physics or the twin dimensions. I mean, we started there. We've got all that history. We still carry that history around with us. The only thing that happens each stage along the way is something drops down below the threshold. Now, we obviously know that the breathing mechanism and all that, we don't have to think to breathe every time we breathe, because that's dropped below the threshold and it's just automatic. And each time there's a major transition, very major, then some aspect drops below the threshold and you're no longer, whatever's going to function that it needs to function will, but probably whatever is that's been a drawback no longer has that effect anymore. It doesn't have the same gravity that but I mean, we're basically not that far from an animal nature, because until you hit the birth, so to speak, that second being born again, I don't even think there's this whole soul. You don't have any awareness of that anyway. You don't even know about this journey. I mean, I just don't. I think it's general consensus that it's not that the dog or the animal doesn't have a soul, but he's not aware that he has a soul. Okay. That he's not aware that this is the journey. That's not on his radar yet.
And DK says, I was trying to think of how to put it in words for a second, but DK says somewhere that you'll know who you can associate with at a certain point. And it sounds like what you're saying is, you generally want to start associating with the people who've made that same level of connection. That seems to make sense to me. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the first initiation. I do believe the AA program is for people who have not done that yet, because they don't, what they're missing is that they don't realize they're part of this group. They don't realize that salvation is theirs. On another level, there's probably a number of them who really feel that they may have done wrong enough that that they can't be part of something. They don't know Christ, if you will. They're not, they haven't maybe realized humanity has a different future than what they've been introduced to yet. And that future is up, if you will. That future is good. And if they didn't get love, care, and attention when they were very young, they probably feel very disconnected to humanity.
And they are, essentially, because
Yeah.
they're doing that actively.
And it's just, I mean, the actual nurturing is, and touching and feeling and all of that is very key. I was doing some research, and Beirut, before it started having wars, didn't have orphanages because it never had orphans. And frankly, it didn't, because if there was an illegitimate child coming, it was the responsibility of the brothers to kill that child when it was born. So you were not having orphans. And I would imagine if a couple of parents in a family group, something happened to them, the family group took the children, if there were children. And so they didn't have orphanages until the early 50s, I think, or somewhere in there. So there were some studies done on them. And in these orphanages, I mean, there wasn't a lot of money devoted to them. They weren't like club feds are in California for the prisoners. That's what they call it out there, is club fed. They had everything put in it. But anyway, they described them. They would be cement block rooms with a very, very high window that let in a little bit of light, but you're not getting any vision out of that window. It's too high. And so, and the care, for the most part, the care was not picking that child up, nurturing that child and carrying them around and doing all that kind of stuff. They were left in their cribs for the most part. And then when it got to a point where there actually were some kids who were there who were old enough to start taking care of the other kids, then that's where the care came from in terms of interacting with them. So, and of course, males are preference to females in that society, especially probably, I don't know if it's changed now, but it certainly hadn't back in the 50s and the 60s. So the IQ, they evaluated the IQ on these guys. Boys had 70 and the girls had 50. And so, I mean, if you don't have the stimulation, if you don't have the touching, the feeling, and the patterning that comes at an early age, you're not going to feel part of a group because you didn't get introduced to a part of the group. makes a big difference. So when you want to talk about being born again, there's a significant factor right there between, first of all, animal man moving into understanding that he is human and has a different future, or it actually even has a future other than to live and to die. You know, that's a big transition. We take it for granted because we were brought up in Christian environments where everybody got a dose of it, whether they were part of it or not, because they either were part of it or they realized they weren't part of it in most families, because some kids went to church, other kids didn't. But the point was, everybody got a clue that we had a future of some sort that was beyond our animal nature, if you will. And that's a short version of you're born again, but understanding you're in that community, that you're part of that, and that community has a whole new set of parameters available to you that the animal kingdom does not have. And as we transitioned out of it, at some point, you figure out. So when he talks about being born again with the recognition and the understanding that you're a human being, and you've transitioned out of the gradual transmission of going from animal state to man, and you're consciously aware of it. And then you learn more about it, of course, as you move into that realm of being born again, and that consciousness will eventually open up to you. Might be slow, nothing wrong with it being slow, but that prior to that, I mean, you are animal still in terms of consciousness early on. And we're, for the most part, we should be pretty much out of that at this point in time. I see you working it over in your mind, Donnie.
Well, there's just so much judgment that we face from everybody. And when you get to that point, I think a lot of the judgment just absolutely goes away, and you can look at people for what they are, but they will not be looking at you like that anytime soon. So there's that opposition immediately there, where you're accepting them into your world as part of the whole, and they're trying to get rid of you out of theirs, you know?
No, I'm way further back than that.
Okay.
I'm when I talk about the animal nature, I'm way back. Okay, you come from generations that have already been born again to start with. Okay, but somewhere back there had to be a lineage that made the leap. I don't think, now, like I said, I think the AA, their job, in fact, I had a friend of mine, she was a psychologist. She said, I went to AA for a year before I figured out it was a spiritual program. Okay. But they somehow do not feel connected. So they seek drugs, or they seek alcohol, or they seek something like that. Those are all Neptune deals. Okay. They're just the false deal. Okay. So, but on the overall, for us, the last 2,000 years have been driving that born again connection to realize that this chart is our chart here, this chart. This is us and our future, you know, our past, if you will, as man, human being, moving towards spiritual man. But prior to that, I mean, let's face it, what Lemuria was the first time when the divine, the mental got connected with some of the animal creatures to make the very early transition. But you're still, I mean, you're dealing with an animal at that point in time. And you gave him a little bit of a brain. And evidently that wasn't real good, whatever transpired, because Lemuria went down and out. DK says it, first of all, had the volcano, which then sunk the island into the sea. So the flood was Noah, where I would expect, again, the animal nature and the not coming into the spiritual kingdom or wanting to work towards the spiritual kingdom gained more strength than whomever the powers that were to be were going to be able to go forward with. In other words, it would have been a defeatist realm. And if you give that animal nature more power, but no more evolution, well, I mean, isn't that what the flood was all about? Was getting rid of the wicked or something like that? Saving, what was Noah doing? Noah was chosen because, not just because he could count 1 and 1 is 2 and get them on the ark. Okay. So this has been a battle we've been going through for a long time. And we're just, you know, obviously there's some advancement every time because we are where we're at right now. And some of, I mean, some of whatever is going on this planet right now isn't too far from the past, you know, or that they've regressed, or it's become more apparent and it was always in the background. I don't know what any of those were, but we're still working on this battle. So you've got to be, that born again is that you now understand and recognize you're in this kingdom and you are going to go through this trajectory of consciousness and growth and development on this planet, because that you now understand the program of the planet. This amount of it, at least, whatever's on this chart. And and what have we got? We've got a certain number of people on this planet who say, I don't want to go anywhere. I want to live forever. And I'm going to do it this round. You know, I've figured out how to be able to do that now, is live forever. But I don't want to go incarnate. I don't want to evolve. I don't want to go up there. I want to put myself in park right here. I'm happy with this level of the journey. And this is where I'm going to figure it out. Now, they obviously did not read the Bailey books because the one thing that is said, and I think probably Blavatsky said it first, but it certainly said in the early Bailey works, which were closer to the Blavatsky because it was making that transition, is that this planet, this solar system is not a place. In other words, the weary pilgrim is what they call it, gets through this, working through this whole chart on the way up, but doesn't get to stay here. In other words, there is no, I don't know the exact word he uses. This is just a temporary stay. You're working your way through here, but you're not going to be allowed to evolve on this planet and stay on this planet forever. That's not what this planet is for. you eventually going to move on. But there's no permanent place here. Okay. And when you get to initiation 6, that's the decision. Where are you going? They give you a choice, although the choice is expanded over even the years that they've been talking about here. But you know, now you look at the you know how these travel books are for the airlines, and you got your choices of where you want to go if you're going to book a trip. Well, principally, you got the same thing there. You can look at it in the back part of Rays and Initiations. Look at, just get in the index and look Initiation 6 up and read the different elucidations of it from different viewpoints, and you find out they're really giving you this, you know, a nice brochure, so to speak. Okay, now do you want to go here, 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 here? You can choose anyone you want, but you can't stay. So that's basically what it says in a nutshell.
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Right. Well, there ain't no home. Your home is somewhere in the future. So, yeah. So, and you have no clue. You don't get all the pictures and all of that of the places either. In other words, you know, you don't understand what your accommodations are going to be or anything else. It's the unknown. You're going into the unknown.
Choose wisely.
Yeah, right. Try. Now, the irony is, they'll say you don't ever choose unwisely. So, but then you read about the Buddha who chose such and such or something, whatever it was, and that really wasn't the place he was supposed to go. So eventually he's going to go wherever that was. And I think they make, there's at least one more they make reference to that way. In other words, your choice is going to be absolutely the correct one, but this guy didn't make that one, and that guy historically didn't, but they will eventually get wherever they're going. And so anyway, so much for that. But enjoy the journey while you're here is what, you know, I mean, it's work. I mean, that is and the further up you get up this chart, the more, I would say the more serious you get and the more responsible you get to understanding there's work to be done. You know, for the most part, down on the bottom there, I don't think you really understand that. I mean, and like I said, the soul decides you need to incarnate because it needs some experiences. But in the early ranges of that, from what I understand, it doesn't look your direction at all. Has no interest in what you're doing. You're just there to rack up the experiences and the vibrations and the patterns or whatever that you're supposed to be racking up before it can even consider you, much less entertain you. And it's really not going to have any interaction with you until you come knocking at its door, because you've worked your way up and built wherever the little missing link is, whatever that little bridge is going to be. You've built the anacorona to bridge over it, and you figured it out. So,
And that's kind of built in, I assume that's just part of it. But it seems to me, and I'm sure these other guys, that or those of us who actually wanted to serve the country selflessly, because there's others that just are doing it for benefits or whatever. But it seems like it's built into us to want to serve. And then we lose that ability at some point, but then kind of start to find out that this is here. And then it's like, oh, well, this is what we're really supposed to be serving. Need to
Right.
get on that. Let's go to basic training for that. Where's the, you know, and then we'll get to talk to our drill instructor who's teaching us how to do it, right?
Yeah, right. Now, I did have a, on the concept of serving, I had, I'm just putting some notes together myself because we talk about service. Okay, down here, and we really see it as a category of something we do with our energy, how we apply our energy. Okay. Am I saying that in such a way that it makes sense? It's a category of action. In other words, this person is going to serve. Okay, that one doesn't serve. They just do. Okay, but we categorize it as, but it is a category of action, and we separate that out. We know some people serve, some people don't serve. Okay, whether it's the military or whether it's because they're a priest or whether it, whatever, but we pick people out and we categorize their action, and that's what we give them. But the important thing to understand is that as you move up this chart and as you incorporate those other bodies into your consciousness, like linked to the spiritual triad, so on and so forth, all of that information and that energy, that is your being, that is your expression of what you are. Other people identify it as service, but for the individual who is moving up here, this is not parsed out as something separate. The service is your nature, and the nature of who you become, the people down lower below describe as service, because for them, with smaller measures of it down here, they've just categorized it because it's a limited experience. And that's more of that monadic energy. So what you're really measuring when you talk about service is how much of that monadic energy is consciously being expressed. Did I get that through in a way that you kind of understand? So the greater percentage of that you get on the way up, your nature to express itself is identified by other people as service. But for you, it is your existence. It is your expression of the energy that you are.
Right.
So there isn't any other way. I mean, you get to the top of this, let's say that whomever does what we would identify as service, they have no other way to express themselves because they're 100% that energy that we identify as service. They don't see it as service. They see it as their being. And this is the expression of their being. It just happens to be in unison with the planet. And we on the lower levels are only really identifying being in unison with the planet on the small categories that it is. So we define people as, you're in service, or you've dedicated your life to service, or whatever. It's all just the difference in the ratio of the energy as you move up here, as to how we categorize it when we're down at the bottom, looking at how you use your energy. So, Any other topics somebody wants to throw out, please feel free.
Melinda's been quiet.
She's painting, isn't she? Huh?
I gotta hop off. I gotta go do an Easter egg hunt.
All right.
I got to
Yeah.
finish this cooking here. I'm in the middle of stuffing a chicken with my with butter and seasoning.
Well, we're an hour and 15 over what we said we were gonna do anyway. So.
Oh,
That's
are
what we do best.
Also, I was taking notes and drawing pictures. I have
Oh,
notes.
okay. Okay. Oh, yeah, I
I
didn't
have
realize.
notes
we're over.
and doodles.
Happy Easter, y'all.
Happy Easter,
Happy
everybody.
Easter,
You too.
everybody.
Happy
Take care,
Easter.
Frank. Take care, Bull.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess we can probably wrap it up.
Yeah, we probably should. I didn't realize we were that far over.
But that means we're
my
having
drawings
good
help me
discussion.
figure out where I'm supposed to be. I'm making a bridge right now.
You need some colored, you need rainbow on there.
Oh, that's on some of my other notes.
That bridge is white. That the energy you use to build that bridge, when you see it in your head, it's white.
It's white.
In other words, that golden thread that makes who you are, you know, in the etheric, that is gold. But that bridge is built with, that energy is white when you see it in the etheric.
Yeah. Well, it's white right now.
Yep.
Just leave it that way.
Yeah.
With my little
Did not know that. I had not heard
little
that.
physical self floating underneath it.
Hey,
Tom,
Carla. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just have a quick question because you just mentioned the golden thread again. And earlier you mentioned, and I didn't catch it, something about the golden thread when it snips that can be your indicator that that's kind of your time to cross over. What can you
Yeah, it's,
explain that again?
remember where that, I remember it talking about it. I don't remember exactly where it was seen because it was years and years ago. But, and it might have then been referred to as a silver thread. But in other words, I think there was somewhere in some of the, and I don't know that it was the Bailey stuff, it might have been elsewhere. And I think maybe if that the silver thread gets snipped, that was an indication that that life force then was separated from, you know, the incarnation was separated or something. It was just an old terminology that was used.
Well, that's what we hear when we hear Pink and Imagine Dragons and all them talking about walking the wire.
Okay. Yeah.
And AKA the Sutratma, I believe is what the technical term for it's called, but you can walk up and I guess you can go up and down that, but at transition, that's cut. It's Does that sound right, Carla?
The Sutratma is the life force that comes down originally. I would expect you're probably looking at that as the umbilical cord. That's coming in.
Well,
Okay,
there's two, one from the head and one to the lower, to the heart or something.
right, because no matter what, you still have the life in the form. Okay, that's the original. In other words, if you're that gives you life whether you got a brain or not, it functioning. Okay, in other words, you follow what I'm saying is that that's the life force that connects. Then you have your other developmental forces, which are probably far more advanced, but way back when all that other stuff wasn't even built yet. But you still had to be able to get that connection of that life force down into the physical. And that one was, I believe you will consider the Sutratma. It's going to be there for everybody, no matter where the rest of the level of development is. In fact, I assume in many respects, I don't know if they use the same term, but I mean, you got the same thing with animals, right? You know? There's still a connection that each one of those little kittens or that cow or whatever has in there that's connected until at birth it's disconnected.
Mm.
And
All
it kind of,
sentient beings, I guess, right?
probably. Well, yeah, I guess there's a certain degree of sentiency for everything, but not the awareness and consciousness that we have. Different gradations of it. Anyway, that's something for you to look up.
They're building the stairway to heaven.
Yeah, right.
Such a good song.
What distance between each step in your stairway?
You're like hanging off the edge of each step.
I'd be
Like
sliding
the
down
cat,
the
the cat in the poster that's like on the wall with spaghetti on its head. It's just hanging there. Just hanging there.
take that stairway to heaven, and I want to slide down the banister back
Yeah.
and see how fast I can go.
And
Hey,
then hit your face on the door. That's what my kid did. Bloody nose.
yeah.
Good.
The thing about it is I was, and again, I have not visited the metaverse of Facebook or something, but I'm seeing that it doesn't seem like they are having the success they wanted with it. Okay. In use or whatever. But if you create a world like that, where humans are supposed to interact with whatever's there and so on and so forth, it's not built with any real energy or vitality. The real dynamic energy that we interact with as individuals to each other in this world and on this planet, in this realm of consciousness that's been created by the union of spirit and matter, has life, dynamic life. I doubt that you can build a metaverse in a computer and have that.
Yeah, it's powered. Anybody can cut that off at any point in time.
The what?
It's computerized, so it's it's powered by electricity. So anybody could cut that off at any time, and it'd be done. So it's not.
But that's not what I mean. What I'm
Oh,
saying
okay.
is the real essence of the spirit, that divine spark of that monadic energy, is in everything that's being created.
Oh.
Our solar system.
Mhm.
Okay, so there's life there. There's real vital energy that's in every one of us. Okay, and it's in the plants, and it's in the trees, and it's in the rocks. It's in all of that. And so we live in this world and we interact with it. You create a computerized world with all the bells and whistles and blah, blah, blah. You want to try to get somebody excited or interested or feel they're entertained or something. It doesn't have that life. That divine spark is not there in that world they've created.
I'm gonna throw this out there just because this is what I thought of about the metaverse and the fact that they're not being very successful yet. It seems like if you look at these young generations and these kids are playing these games, Minecraft, Roblox, all these other interactive online games, the transition would be pretty easy for a big corporation, that runs something like that, to make it necessary that you go through the metaverse portal to check in to get to where you're going.
And it's almost like they could gobble up industry and gaming and all of the online things and make it kind of all fall into one. Like, well, if you want to get in there, you have to go through here pretty much.
Well, they probably would like to
an
do that.
abstract thought, but
Yeah, but they probably would like to do that. But the point I'm making is if they're not having the success with it, then the people aren't having the fun. The people aren't having an energized experience that is doing much for them. And I'm wondering if it's just simply because I don't know what they're offering.
Well, I think that's part of the issue, because if it was kind of foreseen for whoever's creating it, you know, Mark Zuckerberg or whatever, that this is like a different an alternate way to get there. What we're really seeing is it's more like just another avenue for more greed, because that's really what people are going in to do. It's like they're
It's Ready Player One.
they're creating their own universes, and they're collecting things that they don't have here outside of this computerized world, like that they can never attain, but they can go into the metaverse and build themselves a $20 million mansion
next to Snoop Dogg.
Right. And they're leveraging ways that people can actually go into these metaverses and make money. So it's turning into just another point of greed, really. And so it right out of the gate, if someone was like well-intentioned to have it be like another guiding path to get people to different levels of spirituality or whatever, it can't get there now because it's already been corrupted.
Yeah, but I don't think it was ever meant to be. That's not Zuckerberg's route. It's just the reverse.
Yeah. I think for him, it's more of what can I do to live forever, basically.
Well,
and downloading his brain into a computer is the way that he sees to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he sees for himself, but that's not what he's offering anybody else either. Because there's no autonomy in that for anybody else. You know, that's where you're supposed to be just controlled, I think, and kind of parked. But the point I'm making is you can't live in a world that doesn't have that divine energy in the makeup of everything around it. We take it for granted because that's what we are. And that's the world we live in. And that's what this planet is about. It is something that the choices, it appears, of people who would like to control this planet don't factor in, because they don't want anything to do with that. Okay. Because what they want to do is the antithesis of the direction that this planet is go to evolve. So it's like trying to bake a loaf of bread, but you're not going to put any yeast in there. You know, so things like that don't survive. And I mean, they're not vital. The vitality's not there. So we'll see. I mean, you know, you can get up into some of these realms to see how see things are put together. And that's all great. And you might be seeing it correctly, but if you're missing some of the ingredients and you're missing some of the basics, you can try it, but it's not going to come out the way you anticipate because you don't know what you're doing. I think the people who are trying to like fix DNA problems and stuff that they see in medicine are trying the same kind of thing, because they'll want to know why a certain little DNA thing doesn't unfold or something. But if they start going in there and tweaking this stuff, they get a real mess, because they don't have any idea how it's all put together and held together.
Well, I gotta go.
All right, it was great to see you, and I want to see it.
Seeing you guys.
So how's your schedule? Are you gonna have some free Sundays now to join us?
Coming up, yeah, soon it'll be
Good.
especially like school's almost out, like we're in the final countdown. So hopefully we'll have a couple extra weeks of vacation because he got all his work done.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. But yeah, it's just been, life, people living, people dying. So it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Coming to go. So
Yeah.
anyway, well, you look
It's been
good.
a lot of transitions this year. People taking off to the next party.
That's right.
Yeah. Like golly. I probably could do like one a year, but like 4 or 5 people going all in one year. I'm like, dude, you guys need to chill. Everybody don't have to leave at once. Right?
Right.
Yeah, it's good. No worries. Everybody's dealing with it in their own special way. So
Yeah, that's the way it works.
yeah, I think we're lucky. Like my mother-in-law's father or husband is the one that just passed, but because she deals with death every day, and we all just basically deal with that every day, it was like easier than like when you see other families dealing with death and they're completely freaking out. Like it wasn't like that. It was really chill and yeah, like it sucks, but we're just like, okay, all right. Like, what's next? Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. It's like, we're so weird. Our family is so weird. Like, dude, I'm almost positive like it's not normal how we deal with shit. But
Well, maybe you're one of the leaders.
I don't know. I don't know about that, but I'll do my best. I'll do my very best.
The old college try.
Yep, exactly. Well, I don't know. I didn't do that good in college, so maybe we'll do. Maybe I'll do.
You still
better
gave
than
it the
that.
college try though, right?
I went to LSU. Does that tell you anything else?
So you partied a
I
lot.
college tried a lot of alcohol is what I did. I did a little bit of painting and a lot of drinking, and that's it. So, but yeah, I don't know. I was looking into becoming a death doula. So we'll see. I always thought that was really interesting. Just helping people transition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, super interesting. I was like, wow, that's really cool. Because of the way that we all deal with death in our country it's so sad. The way that we treat people that are dying, the way that like all of that. It's super sad. When it should be like, really, it should be a celebration of their life and like the time that you've had together and like all of that. The fact that they're transitioning to like the
They're
next
graduating. Yeah.
Yeah, like yeah.
Or you're being released.
Huh?
You're being released.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You're
Yeah.
Your
And it's
source.
so hard because you have that attachment, like you love that, you love it's a loved one. So it's like you don't want to let them go, but at the same time, it's like they're gonna go. So you have to be able to celebrate that with them and make it comfortable because it's the only time you're ever gonna die, like from this life, And so a lot of times people are so scared when they're making that transition instead of like, because that's how it's set up to be. It's like a freaky, and a lot of times people end up transitioning alone. Their family, like, they're always like in a hospital, and then the hospital has all these stringent rules and like, it's crazy. But with death doulas, it's like this whole, like, I don't know, it's beautiful. It's really, really beautiful when you look into it. So, but I just think, I don't know, I've always found that very interesting. I'm very weird. And I like it.
No, DK talks about that. You're exactly right on the way he explains it too. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. One of the first ones I think was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross that started breaking that out in probably the 70s and 80s. And then she dealt with on death and dying and made a transition that's now a lot easier for people to deal with, because before it was confronting it. confronting death. I mean, it was just, I mean, we don't want to talk about that. We don't, kind of thing. I mean, my dad didn't write a will, and which is no real big deal because things were going to fall the way they were going to fall anyway. But I said to my sister, I said, yeah, I know why he didn't, because then he thought he would die sooner. And she said, yeah, that's right. So for him, that was like a superstitious thing. Okay, if I make my will, then, I can go. I can hang in here as long as possible because there's a relative unknown issue. But I mean, it wouldn't have changed anything in terms of the law. The law has its rules, and it was going to go. He would have done the same thing as the law. So he knew that, but it was just, well, I'm not going to tempt fate, kind of thing by having a will.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. My kid's like, I'm gonna play this song after you die. I'm gonna play this song for you. I'm like, all right, cool. He has all these things that he's gonna do for me when I'm ready to go. I'm like, thanks, man.
do this send off.
Yeah, he's planning this huge party for me. I'm like, all right, let's do it. Let's have a good time. Yeah. He's really good with death. Weird. It's I think because I've been talking to him about it since he was little. With even with our animals, and then with people that are passing. He even went to Bull's dad's memorial and was just like, yeah, it's cool. I get it. I was like, all right. Was gonna ask me, you okay? Do you understand what's going on? He's like, oh yeah. He's like, he became one with the force. And I was like, all right, cool. You got it. Yeah. I remember I got sick and my cat died, who I was my best friend, this cat. And she passed while I was sick, and the door had been closed, so she couldn't get into me. So I was coming out of my sickness, and I had actually been able to get out of the bed and open the door, and she was there, and I was so upset. And he was little, had no idea. He was little, and he goes, it's okay, Mama. Now she's a force kitty. She's with the force. And I was like, oh my God, who are you? You are so freaking smart. But he just I don't know. I was like, God, and it's funny, earlier you were talking about how when we're kids, it's easier for us to connect to the spirit and the other realms and stuff. Because ever since he was a kid, I've heard him having conversations where I've walked in, I'm like, who are you talking to? He's like, nobody. And I'm like, okay. Or I've watched him, you see cats looking at little dust motes floating around. I've watched him do that. I'm like, what are you doing? But as he's gotten older, he does it less and less. It's so sad. I'm like, oh, I like it listening to you have those little quiet conversations with whoever it is you're talking to. But
they probably need to separate from that and ground in here.
Yeah, that's what he's doing. Yeah.
Because they got to do this world. That's what they're here for.
Yeah. But when he was a kid, man, that was cute. It was so cute.
But on another note, I mean, I've seen people who have a memory of a past life, and they might run into somebody who was in that memory, was the other party. And that could really mess up your life here.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
What?
Yeah, because if it was something positive, then you're torn between that and wanting to relive that and dealing with got now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like having all these radio stations going at the same time in your head. And so, but the Many Lives, Many Masters book really gives you a really good picture of the fact that you interact with these people lifetime after lifetime. You just play different roles in the interaction, but a lot of the same party members keep showing up.
I forget where I read that. I read that somewhere a long time ago about how you're still interacting with the same group. It's just in a different
and the Brian Weiss,
or whatever.
The Brian Life, Many Lives, Many Masters was a very good book about that, because he had a client who, it turns out, as he was doing the therapy, and I think he was putting her under. So, I mean, and all of a sudden now all this starts coming out, you know, it's brand new to him as a therapist, because that's not what he's doing. And then, but he realizes over time, wow, this person, you know, this is the way. And eventually he put the book out, but certainly not right away, because he was afraid of his practice,
Of course.
you know. But it's a classic now, and it's a very good book, and it does indicate how people do continue to interact. But she would make comments like, that was the mother in a different lifetime, you know, well, and it's now it's this or that or whatever, something to that effect.
Yeah.
It's a good read. It's an easy read, and it's a very good representative book of what it's describing. Yeah. So,
You said Many Lives, Many Masters, right?
yeah, and the name is Brian Weiss, I think, Weiss, something like that. But the title's definitely Many Lives, Many Masters.
Okay, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna let y'all go. Have a wonderful Sunday with your families.
You
Yeah,
too.
you-
And happy Easter.
Same to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
See you
Thank
next
you. I
week.
love the painting.
Do you? Okay, good.
I love it.
I-
Thank you.
I've painted your little nugget so many times. You have no idea. So many times.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, my husband would walk in and go, why is that thing staring at me like that? I'm like, I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. But
That's
anyway,
great.
I'm glad you liked it. That's one of my favorite pieces so far. So I was like, I have to share it with him since he inspired it. But all
Yeah.
right. Well,
All right.
y'all
We'll see
have
you
a
next
great-
week.
see you next
Okay.
week. Bye.
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 Well, Tom, how was it?
Good stuff. Always.
Should I stop recording? You can keep talking, or do you want to keep going?
Well, I'm gonna have to drop too.
Yeah, I
Okay.
didn't know.
It is 12:15 and it's Easter and the kids are excited and I hear them playing and I should probably go get some of that action.
How you
Yeah.
said.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.